Hey y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion. And well, it's done. World Cup 2026 US, Canada, and Mexico is finished. We have a champion, which is Spain, of course. And I don't know about you, but I personally have a whole lot of memories. And I'd like to share those with you. And I'd like to hear from you in the chat or in the comments about what memories you have of this remarkable World Cup. Before that, y'all, let's begin as we always begin by recognizing, realizing, celebrating, and affirming that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of the more and each other. Yeah, it has been a journey. Time is remarkable because it always passes, right? It always passes. And it doesn't feel like that long ago. It doesn't feel like 7 weeks ish ago. It doesn't feel like 104 games ago that I sat right here and talked to you, not right at the beginning of the tournament. You might remember I didn't jump in right from the beginning, it was a few days in when I had the idea that this tournament was going to be something important for me and, quite honestly, something spiritual for me. And I shared with you at the beginning how the connections and the passion and the excitement and the diversity and the international flavor for me is all very spiritual. And it was. And that's why I've recorded these podcasts. Now, some games have been more exciting and thrilling than others, and I'm going to get to some of those here in a moment. Today's game, the Spain win, wasn't pretty. It was pretty ugly in one sense. It wasn't attractive. When you look, though, and see what Spain was able to do, the relentless passing, the squeezing of a very good Argentina side, when you look at how Argentina really wasn't, excuse me, able to do much, that was, some of that was just them. They seemed pretty tired, and Messi was really a non-entity in the game. But so much of that, I think, also was just Spain pressing and pressing and pressing. And it got to extra time, 0-0. I was very grateful that it didn't go to PKs, even though I think Argentina probably would have had the better chance of winning in PKs. But clearly the better, more dominant, more worthy, not just in that game, but I think across the tournament, that team won. And it really was the team that was favored from the very beginning. And except for the Cape Verde game, when Spain didn't score, that 0-0 tie, and the later on Belgium game, when Spain got scored on, it was really a dominant end to end, start to finish performance by Spain. And I think they deserve credit for that, right? They deserve credit for that. Sadly, Argentina could not pull any Messi magic out of their hat. It was really pretty emotional to see Messi at the end of the game recognizing that at 39 years old, he's not going to be back. I think it was, some might say he didn't need to be at this tournament. He certainly performed well and quite well, almost winning the Golden Boot. But I don't see at 43 how he could be back playing next time. So the end of an era, to be sure, for him and for Argentina. Also, today in the game, we saw the first ever halftime show. And to say it was a little uneven and disjointed would be an understatement. I think overall, I would give it a B minus, in part because the Bad Bunny Super Bowl show, just how amazing that was, choreography, story, technologically, and everything else. That's a pretty high bar now. And this did not live up to that. It was fun to see some performers. Some really kind of sucked the energy out. I don't know what Bieber was doing, playing a ballad, a soulful ballad on the guitar. That seemed a little out of place. Always good to see the Muppets. Big fan. And I love the colors at the end. I thought the kids and Chris Martin of Coldplay acting all weird was kind of cool, and to see what they did on the field. So that was fun and memorable and memorable. And that's what I want to close with here, y'all. Looking back and doing a little bit of looking forward. First, the looking back. One of my themes that I have been stressing here, and if you've been watching or listening to these, you've heard this time and again. And I hope you took me up on the invitation to make memories. I've shared with you from the beginning how I measure my life by these 4-year World Cup cycles. And especially this one was so rich, but so was the last one, and the one before, and the one before, and the one before. And if you have those types of sequential sets of memories based on the World Cup, great. I hope this time added even more. If not, I hope you are beginning, and that by the time we get, God willing, to 2030, that we'll be able to have, again, the chance to make even more memories. So I thought I'd wrap up a little bit briefly by sharing in chronological order some of the things I am going to remember about this World Cup and personal watching experiences. Starting the very opening day, the Mexico South Africa game, I was working that day. But the end of that work shift, I put it up on the big screen. I remember watching it with at least one other person and seeing the clarity and just the beauty of how it was being filmed and presented on Fox. And that was a real eye opener. A couple days later, the US Paraguay game, I think it was the next day, actually, that Friday, the US Paraguay game, watching it with my friend Mark in a different part of town in an outdoor watch party with food and people. It was just, and just excitement. Never, ever forget that. And then watching when I was on vacation with my wife, we were up in Michigan, and we watched on her tablet in a house where we couldn't get it on the TV screen, so we had to watch on a tablet. Listening to US versus Australia, I was up on that same trip all the way up at Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula, right on the Canadian border, and listening to that game, kind of watching a little bit on the tablet, but just hearing that, experiencing that, and linking that to that place. Cape Verde, I mean, what can we say? Throughout, just every time watching them and seeing that joy and hearing the story, just amazing. And actually, one of the Columbus crew players was on that team. The shock of that last U.S. Turkey game, seeing that goal go in at the very last moment. It was after midnight here on the Eastern time zone. I watched that from home by myself, and just felt so many emotions and disappointment. Then the next game, the U.S. played Bosnia and Herzegovina, and watching that at home with my wife on the couch and my dog, and seeing the U.S. hold tight even though we went down a man, and just every moment passing, seeing if we were going to prevail, and we did. Then a few days later, I was in Milwaukee for the 4th of July, and we had just gotten there, and the Cape Verde Australia game was on, or Argentina game. I thought Argentina was going to crush them, but it almost was the greatest upset of all time. And we watched that game in a sports bar, or actually a kind of a soccer bar. Had a nice meal. It was just lovely. Then the U.S. and Belgium a couple days after that. And just watching that with other people at the Columbus Crews stadium, and the disappointment and the shock. And again, it was a beautiful evening, a hot evening, but just so disappointing. And again, with my friend Mark, the Mexico-England game, nothing compares to that. Talk about holding on with 10 players. England prevailed. And then a few days later, the England versus Norway in the early game, and then the Argentina versus Switzerland. Watching that at home with family members who I did not know like soccer, and enjoying that during a party we were having. So much fun. And then Spain versus France the other day, seeing Spain absolutely devastate and dominate France. Lastly, today, this afternoon, watching on the couch. I thought about going out somewhere, but my dad is 86, my mom is 84. They were visiting, and going somewhere would have been kind of crazy and just difficult. So we kept it simple, kept it sane, and stayed at home on the couch watching and just being there with my dad, being there with my wife, being there with my dog. So memorable. In part because my dad and I went to a game in 1994. You know, we were both younger then, shall we say. He was actually younger than I am now, which is kind of interesting. But it was a wonderful memory, because 2030 is a long time from now, and 90 years old is pretty old. So I will always have this memory, though. So grateful for that. And then lastly, Men in Blazers, listening to them each morning, each game, after the game. And then lastly, The Athletic. I mean, what an amazing coverage that they did, and how they just brought this home. And the fans, it goes without saying, the Norwegians and the Japanese and the English fans and the Scottish fans and all those fans and their joy and the joy that we felt, so many of us felt as a country welcoming them. All right, a new week begins, and a new time begins post World Cup. I am so grateful that it went off without any major problems as far as security or safety, no tragedies, no really bad weather, no hurricanes, no tornadoes. T Rump had his little fingers on it in a pretty important and terrible way, but no ice agents were involved in that, which I think is good. But now, with this behind us, it's a race to the reelection, a race to the midterms elections, and that's going to be tough, y'all. And I know personally it was good to take a break from politics, good to get energized, good to be hopeful. And I know I'm going to need to draw on this a month or 2 months or 3 months from now, when the midterms are here, and it's going to be crazy. But we're not there yet. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back to non-soccer coverage here on Uncommon Communion, looking for some writings and reflections like I did previously. But I hope it's been a good ride. I'm sad. I'm grateful. And thanks for being here. All right, y'all. Blessing and good. Be bold. Be well. Hold fast, y'all.